All right, what is going on, everybody? As you can see, there's been a little bit more progress since the last video. If you haven't seen the last video, it kind of documented the process of taking out the engine and transmission from under this car and all of the little semantics that went along with that. There was a lot of little things that I never really expected to find or to be a problem, but in the end, we did get it out, and I'm happy that we are in this stage because now we have the important part, which is the transmission, and that is really all I need going forward. That's the only thing I need to really install back. I need to just make a plate to mount the motor, the electric motor to it, and a coupler that adapts the motor output shaft to the transmission input shaft so that they can work well together. But the new issue that I've found, and I swear this all-wheel drive system is going to be the bane of my existence. The issue that has become apparent with this transmission and the all-wheel drive system is this transfer case right here. The way that it appears to work, from what I can tell, is that it relies off of the resistance from this part right here. So this is what used to attach to a drive shaft that went up to the front where the motor was. The motor used to mount like right about there, and it went into this little differential on the bottom of the motor. Let's see if I can focus it here. It went into this little differential on the side of the motor, and then it had shafts that came out, and those powered the front wheels so that they would twist and spin. And it appears that it relies off of how much grip the front wheels have. If the front wheels have a lot of grip and they don't really want to move, and there's a lot of pushback on this, then the rear output shaft spins. But if I just spin the transmission input shaft, this is the only thing that spins, not that one, because again, there's no resistance on this because it's expecting these wheels to be stationary and having a lot of force required to twist them. But in this case, it's just freewheeling. It's not doing anything. I just push with my hands. And so all of the power gets diverted to that because it thinks the front wheels don't have any grip, and so it tries to do it in that way. So I don't know exactly what my solution is going to be yet, but I think what I'm going to have to do is make a plate that screws into these bolts here. Let's see if I can get them to focus again. There we go. I think if I make a square bracket that screws into this plate and like weld it to the transmission, or use some of these bolts here as like mounting points and kind of have like an L shape, so it's like comes out here and then goes like that and attaches to the transmission somewhere, and it just keeps this part right here stationary, then all of the power should go to this flex plate up there, which goes to the rear wheels. So I think that's going to have to be the manner in which this is set up, because again, it's kind of screwing me over. I would love to get a rear-wheel drive transmission for this car and get rid of this whole transfer case, but there is so much other stuff that also has to be changed with that in terms of the rest of the drivetrain. I think I need a new drive shaft. I would need a different way to mount the transmission because it relies on this bracket from the transfer case. And there's just a lot of other little quirks under there from the all-wheel drive system that kind of require this transfer case to still be in there. So I can't really do much about it. I just got to live with it and try to make it work as best I can. So I'm going to see what I can come up with. Hopefully we can get this working. And yeah, so let's see what we can create here. Before I start working on that, there's one comment I want to make, though, about just how much progress cars have made in terms of combustion engines. Because, this was 2002. This was kind of a really great engine for this car. It's an inline 6-cylinder, but it only had about 170 or 180 horsepower. And there's so much there that, should be able to create so much more power. And I think about, like, I have my Ford Fusion, which is a 4-cylinder, and it has almost 200 horsepower. It's naturally aspirated. It's like a 2-liter or 2.5-liter i4. And there's no turbocharging. There's no nothing. That's just how it is. So, this is fuel injected and everything, but I guess just the way that, the computers and everything work and the Vanos and everything just isn't as well optimized. Even with 2 extra cylinders, it's still falling behind my car there. All right, so I believe I have solved the problem of the all-wheel drive system kind of sending power to the exact wrong direction. So before, like I said, there was this offshoot to this propeller gear that wanted to spin whenever I spun the shaft where the motor power came in. So I cut a piece of steel here, as you can see, and I've bolted it on. I found that it really doesn't take that much force to there's kind of like a differential in here as well, where it's like a limited slip differential where based off of how one side is turning, it'll send power to the other side and vice versa. So it needed just a little bit of force, and that's really what that steel right there is providing. It's bolted directly to the transmission, so it's not going to move right there, and then it's bolted to the propeller gear, so the gear can't really turn anymore. So now when I turn this input shaft, you'll see the output shaft turns and not that one. And so that should really solve that problem. And now it's on to fabricating the parts to get the electric motor connected. So it's going to be that adapter plate that'll screw onto the face of the bell housing, and then the coupler that matches the electric motor's output shaft and mates it with the input shaft on the transmission. And that's really all that should take. I got to build a little bit of an engine mount though, using the mounts in the car, because it used to rely on the motor as kind of the front support to hold the transmission up. That's the only spot on the back where there's actually any support for the transmission. All of its real support came from the engine. So I need to retrofit some sort of bracket inside of the engine area there that will support the electric motor from below, and that way this transmission won't just kind of flop out of the bottom of the car there. So those are the next few things on my list of never-ending things to do on this car, but I think we're making really good progress, and I'm happy that that problem is solved now. So let's move on to the next part. All right, so I think I also have a solution to another issue that has been pointed out to me by a viewer by the name of Luke. We've been talking a little bit back and forth on Facebook, and one thing that he noted about my edit to the all-wheel drive system by removing the CV shafts, which you can kind of see right there, is that the bearing kind of relies on them to keep the bearing together. It applies pressure from both sides, so there's a nut on the outside, and then it presses and kind of pulls the shaft up against the back, and that kind of holds the bearing together. Without that, if this car started to drive, the bearing is pretty much likely to slowly separate and fall apart, and the wheel will just kind of plop out, which we don't really want to happen. Now, there have been a few options we've discussed, and I think the best option is going to be using my old CV shafts. The ones over there are actually brand new. They only have about 8 miles on them because I installed them over the summer, drove it to test it out, parked it, and then removed the engine. So they're brand new. I don't want to mutilate them because I can just flip them and sell them for a few bucks. So I have the old ones though. So what I can do to reduce, the rolling resistance and the rotating mass of the wheels, while also giving it rigidity in the bearings, is take the part that would normally screw into the back of the wheel, put that back in, but then remove the rest of the shaft. So if we kind of look at that there, just that little shiny part and that little peg, that's all I really need. Everything else on the shaft can be removed, and that way the bearing will have, again, that rigidity and that structure back inside of it, and that way it won't move, while also giving the advantage of just rear-wheel drive and less rolling resistance, all that kind of stuff. So I think that's the best solution. I'm going to go see if I can grab those, and we'll see if we can hopefully get that put together tonight. All right, so here's kind of a more clear idea and way I can show you guys exactly what I'm planning on doing. So these are the two old CV shafts, and this one broke. That's why it was replaced. Normally there's an extra long bit that goes kind of across the engine. It's kind of left in the box there. So I have these two short sections, but I can even make them even shorter and put them back inside the wheel. If I remove this little clamp here, then this kind of cup and this spindle come out. And so this goes inside of the wheel hub. This is the outside right behind the rim, and this is kind of like the inside of the brake caliper. And so if I put this back inside and I put the nut in, then that kind of compresses the bearing and makes sure that it doesn't fall apart, and adds again that little bit of rigidity back into the car. So I'm going to see if I can get this clamp off, and since this is just a U-joint, you can see I can bend it. This should just slide out really easily, and then I can install that if I can find a bolt to put around that. I might just use the nuts from the new ones and try to sell them without it. We'll see. So I'm going to try to do that and see if I can get that apart. So let's see what happens. Okay, so here's what I was trying to describe in the garage. So this is one of the CV shafts that I've got, and I took down the little rubber boot so I can get access to the bearings, because what I need to do is just get and isolate this part up here with the splines on it that go in the wheel bearing, and then the nut that I can screw on the end, and that goes and kind of holds the bearing together. I don't need the rest of the shaft because that's just extra weight, and there's nothing that I can really support the other end of it with. The other end is just going to flail. I can't afford that. And I can't really leave any of this stuff in there because it's going to throw off balance, it's going to add other rolling mass, that kind of stuff. So I can't really have that. So I need to take all this stuff out. We can see over here, I've already done it to one. Just got to take an angle grinder. But this is kind of what the end product looks like. It's just a cup with a spline and a nut, and that's really all you need there. So there's a lot of weight reduction going on here, but the way I'm able to do this is, as you can see, this can only bend about this far. I can't push it any further. But to get the bearings out, you have to be able to spin this silver part right here, which is like an inner bearing, a little bit further, and then all the ball bearings fall out, and then it kind of just pries out. But I can't get it like it is in this form to go that far, to get it far enough where these bearings right here, these little ball bearings, fall out. The only way I found to do that, it looks like there's like a pressure fit with how this shaft goes into the inner bearing, but I can't seem to get that loose. So what I just did is I just took an angle grinder, cut it as close as I can to the bottom of the bearing, and then I'm able to rotate it just that little extra bit to drop out these bearings, and then this whole cup just comes right off. So I'm going to cut this one, and we should have two that I can then go put up in the car. Alright, so now as we can see, we have two of these spindled cups. Still in pretty good condition inside, but the interesting thing about this is, like, the person never said that they were replaced, but if you look at the inside of this one, it's kind of got like little splines there, little symbols. But if I pull up this one, already it feels heavier. And this one must have been like the stock one. Again, if it'll focus quick here, of course it won't. There we go. You can kind of see it's a pretty different inside, and again, it feels heavier. So they must have been replaced at some point. And I don't know if you guys recall from my original video discussing when I got the car, but I listed a large number of things wrong with it. One of them was that there were no actual nuts. You see how there's those little screw threads on the end again? Okay, so you see how there's those little screw threads on the end? Usually there's a nut that goes on there that makes sure that this doesn't just fall out of the bottom of the wheel. But this one, as you can see, it's kind of dirty, and that's because there used to be welds all over it. They didn't have the nut, so they just put a bunch of welds so that it couldn't just undo itself and fall out. And so I'm hoping that the threads are good enough that I can put the nuts from my newer CV shafts, because these are, again, were my old ones that I took out. They didn't have the nuts, so I need to find the nuts from somewhere else. Hopefully I can get them off the old ones and use them, and hopefully the threads are exactly the same. But yeah, I finally got these separated, so now we can go toss those on the insides of the wheels and make sure that our car doesn't just kind of lose a wheel at some point. So I'm quite happy that I thought of this, and I'm happy that I actually had those replacement shafts, because I probably would have been screwed if I didn't. So this is kind of a lucky break, and now we can really be confident in our rear-wheel drive conversion of this car, and we can actually, drive it like a normal car, and it should be okay now. So I'll get these installed, and I'll get back to you with what we're going to do next. Okay, so as you might be able to see in that time lapse, and I know it's a little bit dark here, I can't quite get a light over here right now. I was able to at least get one of these splines put into the wheel hub. The other one needs a little bit more persuasion, and that is because if you recall my first video talking about this car, the hubs that were installed into the wheel bearings, they didn't actually have bolts on them. They were welded, and it was only held in by just welds. There was no bolts, just a bunch of slag that prevented the thing from actually unscrewing. And so because of that, the one on the other side, on the driver's side, the threads are a little bit messed up, and there was a little bit that got into the actual splines inside of the wheel bearing, and because of that, it takes quite an amount of force to push it through and tighten. So it's a little bit late at night, so I'm not going to do that right now. I'll finish that tomorrow, but now I just have to put this tire back on that hub, and these bearings should hopefully be a lot stronger now and actually not fall apart. So I sacrificed an old pair of those, CV shafts, but I wasn't going to use them anyway. I was just going to toss them. So at least that will give this a little bit more structural rigidity and a little bit more confidence when I'm going around corners, so my whole wheel doesn't just pop off. So I think that was a great idea on my part to recycle those and put that back in and get this car to a somewhat functional state. So now it's pretty comfortable, or at least I'm pretty comfortable at pushing this car out of the garage and stuff and being able to clean the floors. You can see there's a bunch of oil and residual drippage from this engine, because as I mentioned, that oil pan is pretty well shot, or I guess maybe the rear main seal, one of the two. It's leaking from toward the back. That and the power steering has kind of been dripping, so I need to definitely clean the floors and give this a good sweeping. So now that these are in a functional and reliable state, I feel comfortable pushing this out, and I can finally clean this up. So we've solved a few problems in this video. There's still a few more that I need to work on. Like I said, I need to work on making that bracket for the electric motor. I need to kind of make maybe a little bit more of a strong solution for holding that front output shaft in place, because the steel that I used isn't the strongest. It works, but I think I'm just not even going to try that. I feel like I'm just going to try to jump to a stronger metal to ensure that it doesn't shear or bend or break at any point, because if this car gets stranded, I don't know how I would be able to get it back. So I want to really cover my ass with everything that I can here. So I want to make sure that that's a little bit over-engineered to ensure that all the power goes to the rear wheels all of the time. So, and also I'm trying to sell this heaping mess you've been looking at here. If you know anybody, let me know. It actually ran pretty well. So yeah, there's a little bit more that I need to experiment with. I got about the rest of the week. I leave on Sunday, so I'm going to try to do as much as I can in terms of fabrication. I think tomorrow that clutch plate right there, right about there, is going to come off, and that way I can cut off the transmission receiving end. I don't know if I can show you guys here. There is, it's a little bit dark, but inside of there's like a splined shaft in there, and that goes onto the transmission that I pulled out. So I need that chunk to weld to. Actually, I have it out here. I can finally show you guys what I was talking about before. There. Whoops. Okay. So on the electric motor, oh, that's a little stuck. What the heck? Alright, so I can finally show you guys what I have been talking about quite frequently. So I have this adapter plate right here, and as you can see, it's also got splines inside, and that meshes perfectly onto the output of the electric motor. And so what I need to do is, if I can focus here, I need to adapt this and weld it to kind of the chunk from the output on the transmission, or the engine over there, because then that way this will connect to my electric motor, that will connect to the transmission, and these two will be one unit, so that way the electric motor can connect to the transmission, and then we can get power from the electric motor to the transmission and actually move forward. So this is an important piece. I don't know if I can actually fabricate and use something that uses these holes, or if I'm just going to weld it directly onto the end of this. We'll see when that time comes, but this is an important piece, and I'm happy that I have it. So there's a little bit more fabrication that I got to do, and I'm going to definitely look into that probably either tomorrow or Wednesday. So that's kind of where I'm going to leave it tonight. That's about all the work I can do with the daylight and temperature limitations of New England. So I'm going to call that a night. I really hope you guys enjoyed following along this progress, and I hope you guys are ready for the next video, because who knows, we might even have something spinning up by then. I'll keep you guys updated. Definitely check out my blog for, again, more instant updates, electricbeamer.com. There's also my Patreon link down below if you guys want to help out this project. There have been a lot of costs going into this, and I want to make sure you guys get the best content possible, so I'm not trying to skimp on anything. So if you can help out in any way, I can help you guys out in return. I'd very much appreciate that. So that's really going to be it for me today. I hope you guys really enjoyed, and if you want to see these future updates, definitely don't forget to subscribe. If you like the video, press like. It does help out. But that's going to be it for me today. Again, hope you guys enjoyed. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.